I'm Dalia Mendez.
Nancy Garcia.
And Janice Flores.
All right, so Dalia Mendez is a fellow social studies teacher. She's actually the department coordinator. Nancy Garcia is the department coordinator for the English department. And Janice Flores is another fellow English teacher. Today we're going to be having a PLC, and we'll be discussing collaborating between our two departments, going over lesson plans, data analysis, instructional strategies and best practices, action planning and some next steps we can take with our students, and lastly, reflection and closing. For starters, we can begin with going over lesson plans. We can kind of figure out how our two departments can coordinate and collaborate our efforts in maximizing student achievement. For starters, where are you all at as a department right now in this school year?
So right now I'm in our British literature unit, and so we're starting with the Anglo-Saxons, and currently we are in the Romantic period.
Okay. And you, Miss Flores? Or Mrs. Flores, sorry.
We are currently finishing up a research project and are going to be moving on to a multi-genre unit that will include fences and other stories from around that time period. So I will be coming to you guys for information about what was going on that time period as far as regarding like civil rights and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you, Mrs. Mendez, what are you going through?
Right now we're going through the Vietnam War, which touched bases with civil rights movement because they're happening at the same time. So we're focusing right now, and the students are looking at the societal issues at the time, the anti-war protest, and the anti-draft, right? And more importantly, like looking at a closer look at the anti-war protests as to why minority groups were protesting the Vietnam War.
Okay. For me specifically right now, I am in the interwar period between World War I and World War II. So right now we're going over the Great Depression in world history. Economics, we're going over economic indicators in the business cycle. Now, how can we, due to our diverse lessons and everything like that, how can we collaborate together though to kind of contribute with one another, like an interdepartment coordination?
Well, you've already been helping me with the British literature portion of it. I do have to present to the kids like what's going on during the time period and how that's affecting the literature that's being written during that time. So it helps me a lot when you give me information and resources about like who or what's happening during this time period, like who's like in charge, and some of the effects it already had, the effects of the literature of that time period.
Okay. So did you require any other additional templates or sources of information, or?
Yes, I will. As I move through the timeline, so right now I'm in the Romantic period. I'm moving into the Victorian era.
Okay.
And so if you could have something for me, like any additional information that would be helpful for the kids, like especially visuals, it's very helpful for them to see like how the people were dressed during that time period. For the boys, they like to, look at the weapons of that time period.
Okay.
So stuff like that.
That'll work.
A lot of visuals is helpful.
Okay. And let's see, so going back to Mrs. Flores, your multi-genre unit, and you and Mrs. Mendez are kind of coordinating on that with civil rights movement. So now the multi-genre unit, what, like decade, like 1960s?
1950s.
1950s?
50s to 60s, yes.
Okay, so 1950s to 60s. So there will be overlap with Vietnam. So you can integrate that together. Let's see. For economics and also the Great Depression, obviously I can get with you on getting Great Depression resources. For economic indicators, though, that one's kind of tricky.
What does that look like?
Economic indicators is basically connects to the business cycle. It's the signs that show how healthy or unhealthy an economy is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of tricky coordinating with you all as English teachers. With y'all's, well, I guess with the multi-genre unit, if you're in the 1950s, are you covering like baby boomers?
Yes.
GI Bill?
Yes.
Okay, so
Okay,
then,
yeah, it would work.
so like GI Bill, the baby boomers thing, that's actually economic indicator.
Okay.
So that would work. I could integrate I could take the concept like the baby boomers idea and then fuse it in it as part of economic indicators. Because with baby boomers, that's a sign of people starting families that the economy is going well.
Okay.
So birth rate increases are actually a positive economic indicator. So now looking at data analysis and like examining like student performance, how is y'all's like, how is y'all's student performance right now in terms of like their formative performance, their summative performance? Mine right now, I think around looking at my grades, I'm probably looking at about like 40% of mine are failing.
I would say about the same. I've had a lot of resistance when it comes to completing summative work. They are willing to perform the formative work leading up to it, but the summatives are what really hurts them in terms of grades.
Okay.
Also, I've had a lot of students transferring in with extremely low grades, and a lot of them telling me that they were out of school for weeks at a time.
Okay.
As not an excuse, but as their reason for their low grade. So I'm trying to work with them on makeup work and seeing like how far we can get them since report cards are coming up soon.
Okay.
Another issue, as they're coming in, they're also like not in the same like calendar. Like sometimes they seem to be working on something else that isn't what we're working on here.
Okay.
So that's something also that kind of makes them fall even more behind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The calendar we're supposed to all be aligned.
Right.
Right.
But yes, it is same thing with social studies. We're often finding students come in, they're working on something completely different. We're also having the issues of there's the issues where they had attendance issues at their home campus, not completing assignments. They come in with failing grades. Some are coming from juvie.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there's those trends, those patterns. So obviously all of this collectively creates gaps in student learning. With that being said though, Mrs. Mendez, what's your...
So I'm experiencing the same issues. I have students coming in with like extremely low grades or no grades at all. Either the teacher hasn't input grades for the last 3 weeks, or the teacher is 3 units behind. That is information that I forward to the IST to kind of see what's going on in that campus. I include like the department coordinator to ensure alignment. But I have been noticing that the kids are behind. Either they're not in school, they're in juvie, or you know, on the rare instances they come out of state, right? And this is something that's new to them, right? Some of them are not used to taking a STAR test, right? And so I think like something specifically towards those students that are rare instances that we receive them, I kind of expose them to the CMS, right? Because they have, our ISTs has implemented exams in there that have to use STAR type questions, right? So it kind of helps them with that. And so some of those are the issues that I'm experiencing in U.S. history, which is a STAR testing course.
And with, on the testing coordinator side of it, you can also use texasassessment.gov for practice exams and stuff like that that have already been released from previous years for U.S. history.
Oh, that helps out a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I'm going to start doing that after spring break, because we're
Okay.
testing that the week of April 7th is when STAR testing starts for us.
Excellent. Okay, so now with all these issues that we're seeing, these trends, but what about like student strengths? Are you seeing any student strengths on your part, Mrs. Flores?
I am. With their research project that we just had over societal issues, they were able to choose their own topic. And I think giving them as many options as we did, I think I had 8 to 10 options. They found one that they really connected with and enjoyed writing about and learning about. And so that really gave me some pretty good writing samples. And gave them some good research practice because they were interested in what they were looking at.
Okay. Mrs. Garcia, any strengths you wanted to share with us?
I think this unit, since it's so like history focused, a lot of my population is mostly males, and so they actually enjoy like the history part of it, not so much the writing of it, but it keeps them engaged for the most part.
Okay. Mrs. Mendez?
I find using like writing strategies in the curriculum, the lessons, right? Especially the ACE method, where students answer the question, they cite evidence, and then they kind of sum it up together, right? And they explain that answer, and so that kind of helps them, especially rather than just including the questions, that include the strategy, so that they're able. It's pretty much chunked, right? They answer the question, they go back, they cite that evidence, and then they explain it, they put it all together. So that kind of helps them a lot in regards to their writing portion to answer SAQs.
Okay, so like for me, regarding student strengths, I'm seeing strengths in regards to when they compare and contrast, if they analyze a map, or a political cartoon. They're good at analyzing political cartoons, comparing and contrasting. They're also good at creating. If we do like a create level assignment, or we created propaganda posters, they were very engaged with that. They put in a lot more effort than normal, so that seemed to work really well. So I'm seeing that as that's another good sign. Now for areas of improvement, I'll start off with that. Areas of improvement, writing. Their writing needs to improve. They're not, at least in social studies, I can't comment on English obviously, but in social studies, it just seems like the school where they're coming from, they're just not writing enough. And I do often get students telling me their teacher is a coach. And that
for government and eco,
yeah, for eco, for world history, they have a coach the teacher's a coach, and they don't do anything that's rigor. They don't really get any rigor with that instructor. So they'll say that they're usually just watching a video, like a movie. It's very minimal academia, and when they do writing samples for me, they lack any real fundamental structure, depth. Their vocabulary seems to be behind. The papers themselves don't have a 5-paragraph structure. So I'm at that point where I'm going to have to start doing like a mini lesson on this is how you write a 5-paragraph response. So that's probably the biggest area for improvement is their writing responses. Mrs. Mendez, any areas for improvement?
I would say like writing and nature research projects. I think in those areas, because although I do use the ACE method, I have noticed that the vocabulary isn't up to par. And it doesn't help that, our demographic that we have right now is majority 50% special education, so their vocabulary is already limited. So like a solution that I have tried is to include sentence subs, include the vocab on the board and the definition, and tell students that they have to, in their writing, I should see at least 3 to 5 vocab terms, right, and kind of show them through that guided practice, right? But as far as like full essays, kind of show them, and I have an example for a writing essay where each, like the intro is broken down, the body paragraph is broken down, the evidence is included in that body paragraph, and then what a conclusion should look like, right? And so, I actually stole that from Galliano, when it was a really good one, right? And so whenever I did introduce an essay, I kind of showed them what I wanted, and then I showed them what kind of vocabulary key terms I should be looking for in there, right? But yes, I do think that an improvement is their writing because our kiddos are transient, so I don't keep them long enough.
Right.
Nobody keeps them long enough to kind of ensure that it sticks, right? And so I think that definitely has been an issue, and it's an issue that I brought up with Ryan, which is our IST, and he's still trying to look into it. He's still trying to push to ensure that we do not have coaches, because we found out that we had coaches in U.S. history, which is a STAR tested course.
And they're out a lot.
And they're out a lot, and it was a concern that I brought up to Ryan, because I said, kids aren't learning anything. I'm trying to create these made up folders. I'm trying to keep them, I'm trying to get them where I need them to be for that STAR test, because it's a huge disservice to the kiddos when they're not even ready, and then they have to come to summer school because, they didn't have enough rigor, or they don't know the lesson, right? They don't know the material, right? So I think that's also an issue.
So one thing, if you don't mind, that I can share with you is that in our PD from this past PD day on Monday, we did go to a low stakes writing session where they talked about giving them low stakes writing, but also, like you said, kind of going back and looking at what they wrote and editing what they wrote. And one of the things we discussed about enhancing that was giving them a goal. So like look up a synonym for 3 words that they choose and have them pick something that sounds more advanced than what they wrote. So I can get that to you tomorrow.
Or the radar.
Radar, yes.
Yeah, that'd be, I could
Yeah, that would be helpful.
I could also use.
They had us practice it too, and I'm like, my rating's perfect.
I could also use 5 paragraph templates and or any sort of way to jigsaw it, chunk it for them, anything that assists them. That pre-writing phase, that's something I could really benefit from, and then I can get them to crawl, walk, run to actually doing a 5 paragraph response.
Right. So it stands for replace, add, delete, and reorder. The way she explained it to us, but obviously we're adults, so we can take the instruction and actually complete it, each of these things, but we discussed that with students, especially our students, we would have them, give them a goal, replace 3 words or 4 words, add in 2 pieces of information that you might not know, delete words that are text heavy, like when they write THO for though instead of actually spelling it out. And then reorder, does it look like has purpose going down?
Does it flow?
Does it flow? Yeah.
I think just as an English teacher, the kids seeing an example before they even start writing is very helpful, because now they know that, okay, this is what they're looking for. Obviously, providing them with rubrics is also very helpful.
Yeah, because of the standard.
Yes.
The visual.
And so I always keep, I make my own copy, and then I usually keep some from my previous students, so it's a lot more relatable for them, the language as well. So just having that for them to see and okay, now I know what I need to do is very helpful for them. You mentioned a lot of the issues that we have in the English department, but for us, I think in general, just because of the school that we are DAP, I think a lot of my students are not motivated.
Yeah.
Just coming here is already they're labeled at risk, and just depending on how many days they have to spend here, if it's at 45 or 60, they're just completely they want to drop out, they don't care anymore. And so I guess the motivation is also something that we have to work through to kind of push them to finish their days, get here, and do their work.
Yeah, I feel like the longer they're here, it's almost like the longer they're here, the less they care.
Right.
Especially now at this point, because this late in this school year is when they start assigning specific days that lead to the last day of school.
Okay.
They'll give them 66 days or 52 days or whatever, letting them know that they're going to be here until the end of the year, and that kind of discourages them along the way.
Okay. No, I'm seeing the apathy too. especially in world history, I see the apathy because they're freshmen and sophomores.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But also even in economics, I do get my cases of senioritis, right? They start. I'm sure you're seeing that in your English class as well. But I try to stress to them like, hey, your light's at the end of the tunnel, and you don't want to be a super senior.
Right.
You are already at the end. You just got to cross the goal line. But some of them are just out of it, and they're behind on hours.
Yeah.
Some of them
Attendance hours and stuff.
we do have attendance. We do have seniors that are behind on attendance hours, and we only offer here attendance recoveries only Tuesday, Thursday, so they're only able to make up 2 per week while they're
2
stuck here.
hours per week,
Yeah,
Yeah,
while
they
they're stuck
struggle
here.
with
And a lot of them have
Yes. And
30 plus.
Yes, we do have those.
So there's
as well.
not even enough time, if they're here till the end of the year, there's not enough time for them to get all of their attendance recovery anyway.
Yes, I do have one student, well actually he's not even my student, but he was in the first semester for economics, and he can't get the economics credit, but he's stuck here for 60 days. And it's just like, well, I hope he can make up the hours, otherwise he's not graduating.
Right.
So we are dealing with that. Also, I didn't mention either, their writing, the grammar is bad.
Mhm.
Like
They write like they text.
yes,
Yeah.
they write like they text. I have noticed that, a lot of abbreviating, and I find myself becoming an English teacher now because even though I'm not trying to take points off for grammar, it's just I want my 5 paragraphs, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to also stress grammar too. It's just that bad.
Right. That's the standard.
Yes.
Should be the standard.
And in some cases,
Academic writing.
yes, academic writing, but also their ability to write legibly.
Right.
Some of them their handwriting isn't good either.
Right.
And I've had to tell some students privately, just write your paper in all capital letters, so I can read your handwriting, because I cannot read that.
Right.
It is just gibberish. It looks like gibberish on paper. It's all chicken scratch. That's what I call it. But I have to stress to them in private, just hey, look, when you're writing any responses for me, write it all in capital letters. That way I can read it. Anyone else want to share for areas of improvement? Anything to add?
I don't know about the handwriting as far as how we can help with that, but maybe in English, just an idea that I have right now is we could tell them like this is informal writing and this is academic writing. Like we need, like your warm-ups are informal, write them however you want.
Right.
But when we're doing this assignment, you need academic writing and you need to spell everything out and write it properly.
Okay. That's a good
That
idea.
might help kind of transfer over if y'all use the same language that we do, like informal versus academic writing, stuff like that. Then
Yeah.
they'll snap like, oh yeah, I do that in class.
Okay, I like that. I hadn't thought of that. So I do like that. Anyone else? All right, so let's move on to any sort of instructional strategies and best practices. So, would anyone like to share any sort of effective teaching strategies you're kind of realizing in your classroom? Anyone want to start off?
Setting a welcoming environment, especially since some of our kids are very behavioral.
Okay.
They get very defensive if, they feel that they're being attacked.
Okay.
Right? So I think it's setting that tone in the classroom, but also ensuring that the students understand that you're not their friend, you're the teacher.
How do you model that though? How do you
And so-
kind of create that boundary while also having the boundary?
So with them, I tend to allow them when they come in, especially if it's their first day, right? I kind of welcome them. I give them like a survey for them to fill out. I communicate with them. I talk to them. I try to see where they're at, especially at their home campus. How many days they're going to be here, right? And then of course, sometimes they'll come off topic and they'll talk to me in regards to what's going on. So for them, I usually have like 2 chairs next to my desk. And so I usually go over the lesson and I let them know, I'm gonna go over the lesson, if you have something to tell me, wait till I come to my desk, right? and I ensure that the students understand what they need to do, right? So when I go over it, I ask them questions through the PowerPoint, right? I allow classroom discussions, right? And then I guide them, so I usually do that first section with them with the assignment, right? So I model it, I show them what the sentences should look like, their responses, right? If they're highlighting and citing a text, they need to go back and highlight in the paragraph or the excerpt that we're using. And so I go over that with them, and then I give them time after I ask them, and I said, okay, what are we doing? And they have to repeat it. They have to repeat it to me, what they're doing, what's their assignment, what's the expectation, so that they know. And then if I have the student, especially if they're new and they want to talk to me, I allow them to come to my desk, right? And I talk to them for a little bit, and then we go back. I kind of transition them back to their desk. I tell them if they're ready to do the assignment. They usually are, right? And then get started, and then I kind of allow them to come up to me, right, to ask questions. So it's more like of that familiarity, and then when they're kind of really close to pushing that boundary, I remind them and I tell them, I'm still your teacher.
Yeah.
Right? I'm still obligated to let the staff member know if something's happening, right? And I let them know, and I go, this is where that boundary is, and I inform them directly, right? Because sometimes they get too comfortable, and they're so used to you, and you know, and you have to remind them, sorry, I'm not your friend, I'm still your teacher, and I have to let staff members know if something's happening. Right?
Okay. So let's see, Mrs. Flores. Any effective teaching strategies? You can share more than one if you'd like.
Yeah.
That you're finding success with.
Well, like Ms. Mendez said, creating a good classroom culture is super important to me. For the new kids that come in, I let them know, they're 17, 18 years old. Since I have juniors, they're going to be treated like adults, and it's up to them to complete their work. I let them know what they transition in with, in addition to their grades for other classes, because sometimes they don't know what they have when they were missing 3 weeks of school. And for some, it works because they appreciate kind of being treated like an adult. For some, they take advantage and use that as like, oh, I don't have to do anything. So with those kids, we just kind of take them aside again. I'm like, look, you transitioned in with this grade. I'm trying to help you get to where you need to be, at least a 70 for report cards, and I can only do that if you're willing to work. And so I feel like just having those honest conversations with them really helps, letting them know where they stand, why, and what they can do to change it.
Okay. And Mrs. Garcia, did you want to share any sort of effective strategies that you're implementing in your room?
A lot of teacher modeling, having, student samples ready for them. I'm having a mix of like them working, notes, using like writing with a pencil on paper to practice their grammar, to practice, so you could read what they write. And then a mix of going back into technology and using it appropriately. AI has been pretty big this year, and just coming up with assignments that are AI proof. And just being aware of the students writing, how they write, so when I can assign them an assignment, they're not just using AI to develop their assignments. SEL, we went for a PD, and we went to the SEL training, and so the same thing, like the warm welcomes, the purposeful, the exit tickets, and just letting the student know, this is where you're at, this is where we need you to be before you leave, in 15 or 30 or 45 days. So just being honest with them, being helpful with them, they appreciate that, and they reciprocate that as well.
Okay, excellent. For me, effective teaching strategies, I'm finding using questionnaires for new students when they come in, just to help me get to know them a little bit better. Questions where they're from, what school they're from. They're obviously here from San Antonio. Furthermore, I'm also finding gallery walks are effective in the room. So instead of being up there doing a presentation, I have found that gallery walks can help out, especially with the students that are like ADHD, kind of ADD kind of students, especially them. So gives them the opportunity. They have that option where they can walk around the room and do stations instead of being seated and taking down notes. They can kind of take charge of their own learning when they do that as well. Furthermore, I'm also moved the desk over by, I moved the student desk over there by my desk, because I have students that don't like, I'll be honest, I have students that don't like the other students.
Right, yeah.
And they'll go sit over there. So I have several of those. Or they'll prefer to sit next to me and they don't want to sit next to anybody else. So I'm able to go back there and talk to them every once in a while during lessons. Another teaching strategy I've often found useful is also implementing interactive Nearpods. Interactive Nearpods have been pretty neat. It allows them to do student-paced learning, especially when there's like virtual reality in the lesson. You can put in virtual reality stuff. We're going over Russian Revolution, and there was like a virtual reality thing where they got to be in the Red Square, and they got to see the Kremlin, and they could rotate the camera. It's kind of like a Google Earth. It's similar to Google Earth.
That's cool.
But they enjoyed that a lot. So putting that into the lessons helped out. Let's see. Now, as far as like any sort of challenges in your classrooms, as far as like you're getting any sort of resistance from students specifically?
For me, I would say it's stamina for reading and writing.
Okay.
They're just not used to it. They don't like to do it for extended periods of time. So I'm having to kind of let them know that, these are things that need to be done. But it also kind of lets me know how like star retakes are gonna go. So after spring break, when we come back and start doing Star Blitz, we'll get more into the stamina of reading and writing and stuff like that.
Okay. And Mrs. Garcia, any sort of challenges you want to address in your, like you're dealing with brainstorming a solution?
Same thing with the reading and the writing, but just giving them time to read and model the reading for them. It's good. The other day I had them read independently. They did all right, but I think just setting the standard and getting them used to it, like we're reading this day, we're reading for this long, like nothing else. I'm hoping it's going to get a little bit better.
Okay.
They already know that when they come in, they're gonna write. Their warm up is going to be writing, so there's no more complaining of still like, oh, we have to write again. They already know they're gonna write.
Okay. Mrs. Mendez.
So for me, in the classroom, right, it's just, right, when it comes to like using primary source analysis, like the excerpts, it's easier for them to use the ACE method, but when it's in regard to a political cartoon, I find that they struggle with breaking down the political cartoon, what it's about, the topic, right, and then answering that short answer response question. I think those are some of the challenges, and then of course when we get EB students, right, it's easier for me to get to the Spanish-speaking students because I'm bilingual, but when I get posh students, it's very difficult for me to speak to them,
Right.
especially when we don't have the resources on campus to assist them, right? And there's a case I think it was last semester, where I had a posh student, and he was also spec ed. I used the Google Doc translator, Canva, even, right, to translate the work and try to work with the case manager, but even with the case manager, we were both trying to figure out how do we help this student and why the home campus would send a student to our campus when we're already struggling enough to have resources for them.
Right.
Right?
Yes, that is another issue we've had is us getting, because of our transient student population, we do receive students who, if their first language is not English, some of them speak Spanish or Pashto, and some languages, we could get any language technically, and we're expected to somehow quickly adapt. I did learn that Canva is a translator. That was something new I learned because I had a Spanish-speaking student, and my Spanish is not fluent enough to help her out completely, like on an academic level. So I learned how to use the Canva. I knew about the Google Doc translator. But furthermore, also other challenges. I want to thank everybody for their time. I know y'all have to get going, and you got all of you have kids to get home too. I don't. I have a dog and a wife. I have a wife too, but
Are we gonna meet again?
Yes, we can meet again. Let me check the calendar really quick. Sorry about that.
After
we're gonna-
spring break?
After spring, it's gonna have to be. When is spring break again? Sorry.
The 10th through the 14th?
10th through the 14th. So
Okay.
let's.
So we come back on the 17th.
Okay, we'll be back on the 17th. So let's try to meet. We can maybe schedule a meeting for the 19th.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So that
Sounds
sound
good.
good?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.